Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning. I'm your host, Katie Halper, and here we watch the Sunday morning news show so that you don't have to.
And I'm Aaron Maté. Thank you so much for being here. Great to start the week with you and some of the worst people on corporate TV, as well as all the politicians who ruin our lives that they interview. Can't wait to hear their voices. Our website, usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there to support the show. Keep it going and get bonus content. And I guess with that, let's hit Meet the Depressed.
Good Sunday morning. In his frenzied first week in office, President Trump is testing the limits of his presidential power, racing to fulfill campaign promises, to reshape the federal government, and to settle scores.
Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken.
On his first night as president, Mr. Trump granting a blanket pardon to virtually all of the roughly 1,500 defendants in the January 6th Capitol attack and commuting the sentences of the remaining 14.
You would agree that it's never acceptable to assault a police officer,
Sure.
right? So then if I can, among those you pardoned, DJ Rodriguez, he drove a stun gun into the neck of a D.C. police officer who was abducted by the mob that day. He later confessed on video to the FBI and pleaded guilty for his crimes. Why does he deserve a pardon?
Well, we'll take a look at everything, but I can say this. Murderers today are not even...
What does that mean? We'll take a look at everything. He's not going to go back and re-examine all the pardons that he gave and possibly imprison people for pardons. Like, you can't, and if you give someone a pardon, you can't like recharge them with the crime. So
Right, yeah, you can't.
I don't think he'll
revoke
be
a
taking a look.
Yeah, I mean, this is just him being, pivoting, obviously, and like, I mean, it is funny that he couldn't anticipate that question was going to be a setup for pointing out his hypocrisy. But as I always like to say, no one cares about Trump's hypocrisy except the people who already hate him.
Charged.
President Trump's decision to pardon all defendants, including violent offenders, opposed by 60% of...
And by the way, so what he did there, let me just rewind this for a second. Hold on.
Murderers today are not even charged.
So again, a pivot. So now he shifts from what he's doing with these pardons to basically, the tough on crime messaging, ironically, and saying, like these woke mayors or woke DAs aren't sending people to jail for murder. So let's focus on that instead. Anyway, good pivot from him.
President Trump's decision to pardon all defendants, including violent offenders, opposed by 60% of Americans. And even his own vice president suggested in the days before the pardons were handed out, violent offenders wouldn't be included.
If you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law.
The president also...
It's just very funny because these same people campaigned against the protests of Black Lives Matter and called out... we're angry that there wasn't more people arrested for that and for, violence that occurred during those protests. And then, of course, they're giving a pass to people who apparently were guilty of violent acts on January 6th. I will say, though, look, I as progressives, I thought we're not supposed to be big fans of the carceral state.
Right.
So I'm not against giving people pardons. I've heard, I didn't follow this very closely, but I would be confident that there are people who were freed from prison who didn't deserve to be there, who were there simply for trespassing on January 6th, which I don't think should land you in prison for, for this long length of time. So I'm not like, across the board going to be mad at these pardons. But if it is true that indeed people who are violent towards police officers were given these pardons, then that's just very hypocritical from an administration that's like all about law and order, supposedly.
Of course, yeah. And obviously, they didn't even stick to it sounds like Vance didn't even know what the plan was and thought he could be safe in saying that the violent ones wouldn't be pardoned. But whoops.
That's what happens when you're Trump's vice president. He'll like Trump will happily contradict you, as what happened to JD Vance on the campaign when he said that that Trump he made comments about Trump signing an abortion ban that Trump immediately disclaimed.
Yeah.
Signing executive order.
They need like couple therapy, I think. You know, like imago therapy. That's when like you repeat the thing that that person said back to them. That would be a good way to make sure this doesn't happen anymore.
Aimed at shutting down the southern border and ramping up deportations. The first of 1,500 additional troops touching down in El Paso, Texas, to support border security. According to an internal memo obtained by NBC News, the Trump administration is also allowing ICE officials to quickly.
That inscription on the back of that officer's jacket, police ICE. I mean, that sounds like a leftist slogan, police ICE, like, you know, have oversight.
Oh, yeah, true.
Of ICE. You know, maybe that's like a subtle protest.
Right.
But like, you know, I'm not an expert on border security, but why is the military involved? Is this the military's job? When you go into basic training as a soldier, are you trained in immigration law enforcement? I don't think so. So what's up with this?
It's theater. That's what it is. It's like it's just red meat for the base, or red meat for people who are can be kind of like whipped up into a frenzy against people coming into the country. Because again, it's such an easy scapegoat, and you don't have to look at all the things that, you know, the corporations are doing to screw people over. If you just blame it on people who are coming, in many cases, to flee governments that we've flee destabilized countries that we've helped destabilize, as we like to point out a lot. But yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, I don't think any rational person, even people who are tough on immigration, if they're remotely like policy driven as opposed to just hate driven, I think they probably think it's ridiculous to involve the military in this.
You know, going back to that inscription, I wonder if the initial thought was it should be ICE police.
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to get in trouble.
But maybe they thought if we say ICE police, people are going to think that's like an ICE-based, like ICE is in like, you know, Frosty, like
Frosty, yeah, right.
So people would be confused thinking that there's like a police force specifically
on
for ICE.
Yeah.
On ICE, yeah, like on skates, like a police force on skates.
So or skis. Oh no, you can't ski on ice. Forget it. It would have to be skates. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it'd have to be skates.
Yeah.
But maybe to avoid confusion, they inverted it. Anyway, fascinating questions that we explore here on Useful Idiots.
Deport migrants who were legally allowed into the country temporarily under the Biden administration. President Trump is already running into the constitutional limits of his executive authority. His plan to end automatic citizenship for children born on American soil, known as birthright citizenship, blocked by a federal judge.
Obviously, we'll appeal it. They put it before a certain judge in Seattle, I guess, right? And there's no surprises with that judge.
On a trip to disaster recovery areas in North Carolina and California, President Trump embraced his political opponents, but also floated the.
Look at him hugging Gavin Newsom there after like repeatedly calling Gavin Newsom a loser and he sucks at his job. And of course, Trump sees him in person, he immediately folds, you know? He immediately caves.
It's that gravelly voice, that gravelly Gavin voice.
That gravelly Gavin voice. Yes, it got him. It got him.
Yeah. I wonder what I bet you Gavin's just said something nice to Trump, like flattered Trump.
Hello, Mr. President.
Phone call.
Yeah.
Right? Because like that's really what turns him. Yeah.
Possibility of eliminating FEMA entirely, proposing the White House send disaster relief directly to the states.
I think, frankly, FEMA is not good. FEMA's turned out to be a disaster. I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away.
Well, you know, on that point, where's the lie? I mean, for those of us who lived through Hurricane Katrina in 2006, 2005, that was a disaster, right?
Right. But the answer to that, I mean, this is, I think, another example of people like Trump just using any excuse that they can to chip away at any funding or cancel federal programs, right? Because yes, there were mistakes that FEMA made, but the main thing is that like we should be funding FEMA more. It's not, the answer isn't to like get rid of FEMA. We could be like funding, you know, obviously stop funding war would be good. You can invest that money into FEMA. And you can also invest into many other things that would help people during these recoveries. But I mean, they are doing terrible things. Like, according to Newsweek, people have been getting kicked out of their temporary accommodations after their FEMA provided stay expired and have been facing eviction recently as a result. And 3,500 households were deemed ineligible. But the problem is, like, if you get rid of FEMA, what's going to happen to the people who are getting help right now? So I think it's reform FEMA.
Reform FEMA.
Yeah.
You heard it. You heard it here first. And of course, another answer, going back to Hurricane Katrina, is not appointing unqualified cronies to run FEMA. Yes.
People who may remember, it was Brownie during Katrina, and Bush famously said he was doing a hell of a job. His experience was like being the head of an Arabian Horse Association before that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Donald Trump won't be appointing any unqualified cronies. He doesn't do that.
Yeah.
No,
not at all.
no. So we're in good hands.
And by the way, I have to read what the people. We are Democratic. Well, we're sometimes Democratic.
No, we're not.
Right.
No, we're not.
We're never
No, we're
Democratic.
not.
Okay,
Yeah.
we appreciate your participation and sometimes let it filter through. And I got a quote, Everett Barbie, who says 390 likes. What gives, guys? 1350 watching. So at least we've trained Everett Barbie
to be a good snitch. Thank you, Everett, for being a good snitch. That's impressive.
I mean,
yes.
Yeah, we need snitches when you have criminals like these in the audience. So let's get those likes up, or else we're gonna. You know what we should start doing is, like, for every time we need to raise the likes, we should play 10 seconds of Brian Stelter, like torture until they like it.
Okay.
Now, a president does not have the power to shut down FEMA and would need Congress to give him the authority to remake or get rid of any agency. President Trump was also reminded of the Senate's guardrails on Friday night when Pete Hegseth became the second cabinet member in history to be confirmed on a tie-breaking vote. Hegseth was approved by the smallest margin for any confirmed defense secretary. 3 Republican senators, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitch McConnell, joined all Democrats to oppose him.
Just looking at that list of former defense secretaries, the previous 2 basically worked for the arms industry, Lloyd Austin and Mark Esper. They both were on the boards of major weapons companies. Pete Hegseth, to my knowledge, is not. So, look, I know there's a lot to knock about the guy, especially in his personal life. He's been accused by multiple women of, serious sexual crimes.
Yeah, including rape.
He also is apparently a Christian fundamentalist.
Definitely is that, and has a Crusaders tattoo, which is pretty popular among white nationalists these days. Yeah.
But at least breaks the streak of 2 consecutive defense secretaries who come from the weapons industry. So,
right.
Maybe I think
a Christian Zionist, rapist, crusader. It's better. We like when those guys don't come from the arms industry.
I was disturbed about his comments on women in the military. I read the portion of his book in which he basically says that women should be moms and questions whether they should be in the military at all, much less in combat roles.
Senator McConnell called the role of defense secretary, quote, a daily test with staggering consequences for the security of the American people and our global interests, writing, Mr. Hegseth has failed as yet to demonstrate that he will pass this test. Hegseth was sworn in on Saturday and was pressed by NBC News.
Secretary Hegseth, why should women in the armed service trust you?
Guys, let me answer that for the new secretary. All people.
Why is JD Vance?
Vance, seriously, yeah.
But why is JD Vance answering that on behalf of the new defense secretary? Like, why can't Pete Hegseth answer it for himself?
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Yeah.
He's a big abusive boy. He also was accused of physical abuse, like non-sexual abuse. So we should give him credit as being kind of like a Renaissance man when it comes to being abusive. Doesn't limit it to sexual abuse. And his wife actually wrote a letter about that. I mean, sorry, excuse me, Freudian slip. His mom wrote a letter about that. So.
And our armed services should trust him because he looks out for them and he's going to fight for them. And he's going to make sure that we have the kind of military that we can all be proud in, that we can all be proud of. And that, again, when we send it to do a job, we do it well, we do it quickly, and then we get the hell out of it.
And joining me now is Republican Senator Lindsey.
All right. Well,
all right. Well, I mean, that's a kind of I don't know if I'd be happy if I was Pete Hegseth. I'd feel a little emasculated by JD jumping in and answering a question for me. Yeah.
Well, let's hear more from JD Vance. He sat down with Face the Nation to give his first interview since taking office as vice president.
Campaigned on lowering prices for consumers. We've seen all of these executive orders. Which one lowers prices?
We have done a.
So, I mean, MAGA people are upset at this question. Like, hey, remember when you promised to lower the price of groceries?
Right.
Like, what are you doing so far to achieve that? Because Trump issued all these executive orders. One of them was to rescind a previous executive order that wanted to look into lowering the price of prescription drugs.
Right.
And Trump, who campaigned on, again, helping out the forgotten American, decided that he doesn't care anymore about lowering prescription drugs, I guess, by rescinding this order. So, and also absent from that list, as the question points out, it's like you haven't done anything so far to lower grocery prices. And their defense is early on, so maybe something grand is coming. But if you listen to JD Vance's answer, I'm not feeling very optimistic.
But also the point is that they're doing these grand executive orders, right? So sure, not everything is in place yet, but there are things that they could do via executive order that would at least ameliorate this. Yeah.
Yep.
There have been a number of executive orders that have caused already jobs to start coming back into our country, which is a core part of lowering prices. More capital investment, more job creation in our economy is one of the things that's going to drive down prices for all consumers, but also raise wages so that people can afford to buy the things that they need. If you look at our
So he's promising that capital investment is going to raise wages. And again, I'm not an economist, but it strikes me that also what has raised wages is like protections for workers and laws mandating raised wages. Like that's how you raise the wages. You have laws that mandate a certain wage hike. And is the Trump administration going to be doing that? No. In a country where people's real wages have basically stagnated over many, many decades, is the Trump administration going to do anything to change that? I strongly doubt it.
Right. Because as you pointed out, Aaron, many times, the real thing that Trump did, one of the biggest things he did was an upwards transfer of wealth. So, which is a nice indication that Trump doesn't actually care about people's working people or middle class people. He cares about the 1%. Even though it's a big game.
Yeah, but to be fair, this is where I've received some pushback from MAGA people who've written me and in the comment section who claim that they're not plutocrats, they're not like high income earners they claim that Trump's tax cuts benefited them, that that under Trump's first term things were better than they were under Biden's term. So I want to be fair to them, but unless you're going to like just saying that there's going to be capital investment and that's going to raise wages, just call me skeptical.
Yeah.
Call me skeptical. And I guess we'll see. Okay, back to JD.
Late of executive orders. No, Margaret, prices are going to come down, but it's going to take a little bit of time, right? The president has been president for all of 5 days. I think that in those 5 days, he's accomplished more than Joe Biden did in 4 years. It's been an incredible breakneck pace of activity. We're going to work with Congress. We're, of course, going to have more executive orders, and we're going to try the way that you lower prices is that you encourage more capital investment into our country. And yes,
yeah.
So that's basically just lowering taxes for corporations. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Because how do you entice investment as you give tax breaks, right?
Right.
I mean, we'll see. We shall see. Joe Biden, I know, had people on the National Labor Relations Board who were pro-worker, who did things like protect unions, who ensured that people had rights on the job, and I think that's a way to protect wages.
Yeah.
And to protect good paying jobs. And I don't see the Trump administration, who staffed the NLRB with anti-union people in his first term. I don't see him repeating that. And I don't see, the Biden administration, they did have infrastructure projects that like subsidized the building of plants and factories around the country, and that created jobs. Is the Trump administration going to do that? Again, I strongly doubt it.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Okay, more JD Vance on
Oh yeah. On a different issue. This one gets exciting. This one mixes the personal and the political. Here he is being asked about Elon Musk.
Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. In August, you told us Google and Facebook are too big. We ought to take the Teddy Roosevelt approach. Break them up. Don't let them control what people are allowed to say. They've now donated to the Trump inauguration. Are you still going to break up big tech?
So, you know who else was at the inauguration was my mom and a lot of people who just supported the president and fought every single day to get his election. And
they
to make
gave
it,
$1 million
and to make it possible.
each to the inauguration.
When they were
That's pretty cool. He brought up his mom.
It's so kind of JD Vance to invite his mom to the inauguration along with the oligarchs who stuffed the stage. Elon Musk, the head of Apple, I believe, was there. Mark Zuckerberg, Miriam Adelson, and they managed to find space for JD Vance's mom.
Right. I mean, if anything, it's a self-owned, because he's basically saying we are so indebted to these corporate oligarchs or tech bros, really, right? We're so in bed with them that we treat them like as if they were our moms.
That's right. That's right. We have big tech and big mom.
Exactly. Big mama. Yeah.
a lot of people who didn't give $1 million to the inauguration who were on that stage, Margaret. They didn't have as good a seating as my mom and a lot of other people who were there to support us. But
wow. Breaking news. JD Vance likes his mom more than people who haven't given birth to him.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's not impressive that you invited your mom to the inauguration alongside all the billionaires who funded your campaign. Like you think any human being on good terms with their parents, obviously, would invite their parents to the inauguration. You know, you don't deserve credit for that. And it doesn't show that you're like listening to the grassroots because you invited your mom on stage next to Mark Zuckerberg and whoever else.
Right. I know, it's funny. I'm surprised. He should have brought up his wife too, but that would have provoked people, because there are a lot of people who have said pretty terrible things about his wife because she's of Indian descent. So he probably didn't want to bring that up at this point.
Like racists in the MAGA campaign.
Racist. Thank you. Yeah.
I believe fundamentally that big tech does have too much power, and there are two ways they can go about this. They can either respect Americans' constitutional rights, they can stop engaging in censorship, and if they don't, you can be absolutely sure that Donald Trump's leadership is not going to look too kindly on them.
So they're still on notice.
They're very much on notice.
Ooh, on notice.
Yeah, I mean, the quote that she initially read him was that he was saying they have to be broken up, period. Now he's saying they can avoid being broken up if they go a certain way. But does that way include not censoring voices for Palestine who are still being censored?
No.
I don't think the Trump administration has been talking about deporting students who are pro-Palestine. So are they going to be standing up for censorship across the board, including for people who oppose genocide, the Israeli genocide in Gaza? I strongly doubt it. But
me think not.
Hopefully, I'll be proven wrong.
And by the way, we should mention that speaking of censorship or persecution of pro-Palestine people, Ali Abu Nima has been arrested. The great journalist of Electronic Intifada. He was arrested in Switzerland. And Aaron addressed this. Yeah.
Ali was supposed to deliver to take part in an event in Zurich, and he was detained, and he's been held now for a few days, and is apparently going to be deported as early as today, as we're broadcasting this. And Ali has been on Utilities before. He's the co-founder of Electronic Intifada. It's an essential site for news and analysis about Palestine. He's been calling out European leaders, especially, for their complicity in the Gaza genocide. And this arrest of his, I think, is just pure vindictiveness and persecution of a voice for Palestinian freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
And did any of these shows cover Ali's arrest? Of course not. In fact, I don't even think the New York Times has covered it. Like the arrest of a Palestinian American journalist in a European country. I don't think they've covered it. They've just totally ignored it. Everyone's yawned because, arresting a journalist, preventing him from speaking, deporting him, it's normal now. And it's been normal in Europe for a while. Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, the surgeon who volunteered in Gaza throughout the genocide, he was denied entry to Germany last year when he was set to speak, because basically they just didn't want to have a Palestinian doctor speaking in their country, and they feel entitled to do that. That's why they also feel entitled to arrest and deport now in Switzerland, a Palestinian American journalist.
So gross. So much for being neutral, guys.
Yeah. And we'll have more on Palestine later in the show. I mean, as we're recording this today, people are returning by the tens of thousands to what's left of their homes in northern Gaza. Some really moving scenes that, of course, I don't think will get the attention it deserves on corporate media. I mean, this is the Holocaust of our time, and survivors of it are now returning back to their homes today. So this should, if we value Palestinian lives the way we do Israeli lives, then these images will be seen around the world, but they're not.
Yeah, exactly.
But more JD Vance talking about, he was recently condemned by a major church organization in the U.S. For the Trump administration's, crackdown on undocumented immigrants. So JD Vance was asked about it.
Friends of Catholic bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement to enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line?
Wow. Okay. So basically, he's saying here that if you care about undocumented people, right? Or illegal immigrants, as he's calling that, it's because you're getting paid off. Not because you care about them.
Yeah. I haven't heard this one before, that the Conference of Catholic Bishops are making a huge profit off of sheltering undocumented immigrants. I mean, look, I'm not above criticizing big church. I mean, anything
no, not at all. Yeah.
deserves scrutiny, and certainly the church has a long rap sheet of doing horrible things, particularly covering up sexual abuse. But this is a new one that I mean, I haven't heard this one before, so I'll have to look into it. But is it possible, JD Vance, that actually people who follow the teachings of Jesus are actually just concerned for vulnerable people who are fleeing persecution in foreign lands and finding refuge now in places like churches, and that's what they're concerned about?
Yeah. Well, this is what Bishop Mark J. Seitz of El Paso, who's the chairman of the conference's Committee on Migration, right? He's talking about that conference. He wrote, several of the executive orders designed by President Trump this week are specifically intended to eviscerate humanitarian protections enshrined in federal law and undermine due process, subjecting vulnerable families and children to grave danger. Sounds like he's really in it for the money. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
also he's projecting his own stuff because I'm sure, for him, it is kind of revealing. Like, if you're a Christian, you actually believe in these things, right? If you follow Jesus Christ in a way that's not totally self-serving and hypocritical, you actually do believe in providing people with shelter and, being a stranger and a strange person in a stranger's land. So that's an interesting thing. But he is, I think, projecting his own kind of craven financial motives onto this conference. And again, there's so much we can criticize the church for, but this is not one of them. Yeah.
Let's hear from Trump's new border czar, Tom Homan, who is vowing to carry out the largest deportation operation in U.S. history and deploying U.S. military aircraft for the job.
First appointments Donald Trump made after winning the election in November was tapping one man.
You know what? Let's skip this one and go to the next one. Because among Tom Homan's targets are middle schools, elementary schools, for the reason of the fact that they might host gang members, he says. So this is Tom Homan.
Arrest. What criminals are hiding in schools?
Look,
middle schools, elementary schools. You going to go into those?
How many MS-13 members are the age of 14 to 17? Many of them. So, look, if it's a national security threat, public safety threat, and what you need to understand is a case by case. Name another agency, another law enforcement agency that has those type of requirements that they can't walk into a school or a doctor's office or on a medical campus. No other agencies held to those standards. These are well-trained officers with a lot of discretion, and when it comes to sensitive location, there's still going to be supervised review. So it's not like it's an open issue, but ICE officers should have discretion to decide if a national security threat or a public safety threat in one of these facilities, then there should be an option for them to make the arrest.
But someday you could go into those schools and grab people who are just in the country illegally.
On a case-by-case basis, depending who they are, what the circumstances are.
Well, we have school shootings in the U.S., so why not school raids and kidnappings? Right. You know,
yeah.
Look.
And by the way, this is leading to higher rates of absenteeism. It looks like, which may be actually, which they are probably okay with, but apparently, people are actually now afraid to go to school. Some people who are the children of undocumented people.
It's not an issue I'm very well versed in, and I understand that now. Trump's rhetoric and his campaign about undocumented immigration, it did have a lot of support, including from working class people. And so me being like a coastal dweller, living in New York City, I don't want to be blind to people's concerns. I just always come back to, again, like before talking about cracking down on undocumented people here, why can't there be a discussion about the U.S. role in fueling migration abroad? It's like there's something really unfair to me about like U.S. having policies that destabilize countries, crippling sanctions that force people to leave. If you look at all the countries that are the source of migration, you can trace their history and see a huge role of U.S. meddling. For example, take Central America. There's U.S. been propping up dictators there, supporting death squads for large parts of the 20th century. Haiti, since its foundation, the U.S. has been meddling with it because Haiti was the first free country of this hemisphere, a country of freed slaves who revolted against their French colonizers. And France and the U.S. have been punishing Haiti for that ever since. So any discussion to me about dealing with people fleeing these countries needs to deal with the U.S. role in destabilizing them to begin with, and some sort of efforts to address that, because it's not fair just to help destroy foreign countries, and then when people flee, to basically punish the people who are trying to build better lives for themselves. It just seems something unfair, very unfair about that to me.
Yeah, and also, there are lots of things that people are like. I don't think it's because you're a coastal elite that means that we have to throw undocumented people under the bus. I think that there are examples of people being scapegoated. And I actually think it's kind of a talking point to be like, oh, the working class doesn't like undocumented people, because when it's depending on how you ask the question, the support really for deportations really goes down. And the other thing is that there are a lot of ways that having people in this country helps the economy, and that the deportation plans would actually harm the economy. But I do agree with what you're saying about the hypocrisy of the way that we treat these other countries.
By the way, for the record, I didn't call myself a coastal elite. I
thought you did.
No, I did not. I said,
what'd you call yourself?
I'm a coastal dweller.
Oh, sorry,
But,
that was me
yes.
projecting onto you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not hanging out at
right
in at like Manhattan fancy apartments for Democratic fundraisers. You know, there's I just
Sure,
want
yeah.
to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
clear.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
about that. That's something I guess that's you don't know this, Aaron, but you're in my phone as Coastal Elite.
Oh, okay. Well,
Aaron Coastal Elite. I'm just kidding. I thought I knew you were being somewhat self-deprecating, but I think when I hear Coastal, I just think of Elite. But that is pretty funny that I called you that. Yeah. By the way, where are you? Where are you, likes? Where are we in the likes? Where are you, my likers? Hold on. We're not even at 1,000, and we have 2,500 people watching. Guys, we really need to get up to 1,000, like right now. We're at 955. Let's see. Where are we? I'm going to refresh the screen, and we better be higher. All right, we made it to 1K. All right. That's for don't just do it for me. Do it for Coastal Elites like Aaron Maté. Alrighty. Next clip.
Okay, time for TikTok time with
TikTok time.
Congress member Mike Turner, who's been among those on a campaign to ban TikTok, and why we heard it admitted by Mitt Romney and Secretary of State Antony Blinken last year when they had a friendly chat in public, and they both acknowledged that the reason why they want to ban TikTok is because the kids are getting images of destroyed rubble and massacred people in Gaza, and that is radicalizing the youth to not support Israel. And so therefore TikTok had to be banned. And Democrats went ahead with it right before Trump left office. But then Trump, realizing that if he could save TikTok, that could be a big boon for his political fortunes. And also maybe he could save TikTok in a way that like brings it under the control of his allies, say Elon Musk or someone else. So Trump took advantage of that, and he reached some sort of arrangement with TikTok to keep it open. But now Congressmember Mike Turner, a Republican who passed the law banning TikTok, still has concerns. So here he is.
Talking about TikTok. The law stated that January 19th, and the Supreme Court upheld this, that the owner, ByteDance, would have to sell TikTok to an American owner. Inauguration Day, January 20th, the CEO of TikTok, whose company is deemed a national security threat under U.S. law, was seated next to Tulsi Gabbard, the pick to run the intelligence community.
I love the way she doesn't even question whether it's a threat to national security. She just like regurgitates these talking points as if they're true. And like any journalist should actually be skeptical of this. But all you have to do is be critical of China and mention the security state, and you get a pass.
She doesn't seem to, at least in this clip, like the fact there's all these other oligarchs there who steal our data, who censor posts, like Mark Zuckerberg has done. They're all on stage. That's fine. But the guy from a company that is allowing kids to learn accurate information about Palestine, sitting next to Tulsi Gabbard, that is a threat. Right. That's a major threat.
Well, Aaron, to be fair, she did call out them showing up. Remember, that's when we had that beautiful defense of JD Vance's mom, Big Mama. But yeah, she doesn't raise the fact that they censor or national security threats by the logic of declaring TikTok a national security threat. We got Big Tech, Big Mama, and Big Tulsi, all threats.
Despite this national security law, you can see the picture of him right there. And Mr. Trump seems
so bad that they got 2 shots of it, of the same thing.
to have given them a reprieve. The editorial board of the Wall Street Journal said Mr. Trump's TikTok order shows a Biden-like disdain for limits on his power. What do you make of this decision not to implement the law for at least a period of time?
Well, let's be clear.
Just a side note, it's always so weird to me when like the Wall Street Journal editorial page is quoted as some like voice of authority.
Yeah.
When like just their whole like the editorial page is kooky. Their whole thing is just like, let's support the most right-wing neocon policy possible. And yet so often across corporate TV, you'll say, oh, the Wall Street Journal said this. Oh my God, the Wall Street editorial page. That's a bunch of coastal elites in Manhattan.
Yeah.
With no concern for the world, who just want to blow everything up, who, by the way, are freaking out about Tulsi Gabbard's nomination because Tulsi Gabbard has been skeptical of U.S. intelligence claims. And in our state, you can't do that. You must bow down and repeat pro-war propaganda at every turn. So anyway, just, I don't know. if any cable news hosts happen to be watching Monday morning right now, you have my permission to not take the Wall Street Journal editorial page as the Holy Grail. That's my suggestion to you. Yeah.
Wow.
TikTok is absolutely a national security threat. The law passed by Congress that came out of the House China Select Committee that was chaired by Michael Gallagher that drafted this law found that TikTok was a national security risk because of two things: its access to data and its ability to use itself as a propaganda tool by China itself, and the laws in China that allowed China to compel TikTok to manipulate itself, both its data and its access to China and its use of propaganda. The Supreme Court upheld this. It remains a national security threat. And because of that, the United States Congress, the law that is the law of the land, says that ByteDance needs to divest itself. Now, the only
Another side note, how can you hate on a company called ByteDance? That's a charming name. You know, it's
It really
ByteDance.
is,
It's, you know, like, I mean, if I was building a surveillance company, if that's what TikTok was, a great tactic is to give it something, you know, fun sounding like ByteDance, you know, because who doesn't want to be a part of the ByteDance? All these gigabytes of data are just dancing. It's fun, you know. But look, again, he's saying this like these people hate the free market. This company in China built something.
Yes.
Young people like it. It's popular. And again, because, and this is now widely acknowledged, you can read about it, by the way, in the Wall Street Journal, where there was reporting done saying that we really, you know, like people who are trying to ban TikTok, like Mike Gallagher, who Mike Turner mentions, they weren't getting very far until October 7th, when all of a sudden young people were sharing content critical of Israel and accessing it. And that's when all of a sudden you had this momentum on Capitol Hill to ban TikTok. So that's what all this is really about. He said, even says it there. It's a propaganda tool. What he means is that we can't use it as a tool for our own propaganda, unlike all the other major tech platforms in the U.S.
Right. And highly recommend this week's episode with Arnaud Bertrand, where he talks about TikTok. And this is someone who spent years in China. He's now based in Malaysia, and he's an entrepreneur, so he knows about the free market. And as he points out in our interview, like, the crime of TikTok is just that it's Chinese. And the irony is that we are the ones, the United States government praises itself on being a free market, proponent of free market, and they're actually intervening and doing stuff that if China did, they'd be calling out as communist and dangerous.
So here we are using the clip of Mike Turner as a propaganda tool to promote our own content.
Yes.
You know, so again, should we ban CBS News because we use it as a propaganda? You know what I mean?
Right. Maybe
the logic just confounds. Okay, more from Mike Turner. He was, up until recently, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, but he got removed by House Speaker Mike Johnson, who wanted to go in a different direction. And Mike Turner was known basically as a typical Washington Beltway neocon who prided himself on bipartisanship, which means basically the pro-war uniparty. And so people who support that kind of agenda are not happy that he was removed from House Intelligence. But again, what is a House Intelligence Committee really supposed to do? It's supposed to actually oversee the intelligence community, right? That's why you have Congress for oversight. That's not what Mike Turner was doing. And so people who don't want scrutiny of the people who don't want scrutiny of the intelligence community are not happy that he's gone. So here he is talking about his demotion.
Program many times as chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Speaker Johnson ousted you from that position as chair recently. What can you share with us about the conversation you had and the explanation, because you run it in a bipartisan way?
Yes, and I think certainly bipartisanship is incredibly important. And after I had the conversation with the Speaker, you and I spoke.
Yes.
The speaker related, certainly as we discussed, that an element included concerns from Mar-a-Lago. He's since walked that back. President Trump's staff has been in touch with me.
He finally denied it.
President Trump staff has been in touch with me and said that was not the case. The one thing that he has said is that he wanted to take the committee in a different direction. I'm a little concerned because his different direction indicates, pursuing the elusive deep state. And, my concern is the focus should be on the committee of national security, which is what
Okay, I disagree, Congressmember Turner. The point of your committee, in fact, I believe the reason why it was established was to oversee the intelligence community with things like the Church Committee, which actually is celebrating its anniversary, I believe, right around now. The Church Committee, which was, a congressional body, which uncovered ginormous abuses by the CIA, including the fact that it was spying on Americans. As Seymour Hersh had first reported, the intelligence community had denied it. Congressional hearings confirmed it. So that's why it's so important to have congressional oversight, because what happens is, in public, the CIA can lie and say they're not doing certain things, or they can say that there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's a lot harder to lie, though, if you go before Congress and now you're sworn to testify under oath, under the penalty of perjury. So it's important to have oversight, and especially for Republicans who just experienced, not too long ago, their president, their candidate, being framed as a Russian agent with the help of the FBI and the CIA. And liberals are upset to hear that, but it's true. That's exactly what happened. That was what Russiagate was. Trump was framed as a Russian conspirator and agent, and elements of the FBI and CIA took part in that, who also pushed a very dubious claim that Russia waged a sweeping interference campaign in the U.S. election, and that's why Donald Trump won, which was a intelligence community interference in a domestic election, which also underscores the need for oversight. So Mike Turner's saying that they're going to go after the deep state. I hope he's right.
I know, if only,
right.
Yeah, I don't see Mike Johnson doing that. Mike Johnson does not strike me as a very courageous person or anti-deep state, but we'll see.
What else has happened in recent years? The CIA was caught spying on a Senate committee investigating it for torture. Under John Brennan, who we're going to hear from, I believe, shortly. The CIA hacked into the computers used by Senate staffers for their investigation into CIA torture. Again, underscoring the threat that oversight poses to the intelligence community's abuses, and why it's important to have oversight of them, because they're even willing to spy on Congress. Congressional committees also revealed really important information about the dirty war on Syria, including that the U.S. Consulate in Benghazi was being used for the sole purpose of running guns to Syria, where the ambassador Christopher Stephens and other Americans were killed. The reason there was violence there was because that annex was being used to run guns to the dirty war on Syria after the U.S. overthrew the government of Libya. It was congressional oversight that basically brought that out. So, again, if you care about democracy and oversight, then I think it would be a good thing if the so-called deep state was actually being scrutinized in the way that Mike Turner is warning about.
Right. But don't get my hopes up, Mike, about the other Mike. Alrighty. Should we move on to TC? Tom Cotton?
Yes, Tom Cotton.
This is a great one.
Fan favorite, yes.
Fan fave, yeah. Let's take a look at Tom Cotton on Fox, and he's going to talk about a bunch of stuff, but we're going to focus on what he has to say about Hamas.
4 more hostages home. You've been critical of this deal. You've had some concerns about it. It came together, seems like an approach from President Biden and President Trump. Are you confident in the deal moving forward, the fact that there is progress? We are getting these people home.
Well, of course, we welcome home these hostages, and you can't help but be overjoyed in your heart to see families welcoming them back. At the same time, my general preference is not to negotiate with terrorists. Hamas was.
Okay, what does he think is going to happen then if you don't negotiate with, first of all, terrorists? Okay, if you want to call Hamas terrorists, then you absolutely have to call Israel terrorists. I mean, much more terrorists than Hamas, because to the extent that any terrorism was committed on October 7th, it pales in comparison to the systemic terrorism committed by Israel. But this is a great example of how he'd rather kill Palestinians and support Israel's, sociopathic genocidal war than free the Israeli hostages, which he claims to care about. All right, let's
on its back foot. They're not.
Okay, so here he is claiming that Hamas was on its back foot and that they should have destroyed Hamas instead of negotiated with them, except we know from literally the Israeli military and Tony Blinken, of all people, that Hamas has not been weakened. It's been strengthened.
Destroyed. They were almost destroyed. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we didn't negotiate with Imperial Japan. We said unconditional surrender and give us our 40,000 Americans back.
That's a great comparison. Yeah, when we dropped an A bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, that's what we're going to cite as an incident. And also, it's a ridiculous comparison to make with the whole the narrative. And this is controversial historiographically, but the narrative is that Japan refused to budge. Right? They refused to, even though it was really about the emperor. Anyway, and the position he would have. It wasn't about surrender. But in this case, Hamas was willing to negotiate from the beginning.
Yeah, they offered Israel very, very early on to basically release all the civilian hostages, and maybe even all the hostages, certainly all the civilian hostages, if Israel agreed not to invade Gaza, which of course Israel dismissed. Because Israel, again, as is now so obvious, we've seen it all unfold before our eyes. Israel's goal was to destroy Gaza, make it unlivable, cause Nakba 2.0, cause people to flee. And Trump recently, over the weekend, offered a new endorsement of that by talking about cleaning out Gaza and basically forcing people to go live in Egypt and Jordan. And just as Anthony Blinken tried to do, by the way, Anthony Blinken lobbied Egypt and Jordan to accept a lot of Palestinian refugees because the U.S. is on board with Israel's intent of ethnic cleansing.
Right. And again, these people love comparing this to Hiroshima. I mean, other people have said, other Republicans, I can't remember the name. I think it was a congressman, and I believe we even played this in a Republican Suck, but, was waxing poetic about how he wanted to treat this Gaza like Hiroshima. Yeah.
Yeah, and Joe Biden, in his last interview with Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC, shortly before he left office, he said that Benjamin Netanyahu told him that, well, listen, you guys did Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so why can't we do that?
Exactly.
And then Biden was like, he made a legitimate argument that the terrorists are hiding underneath the civilians, so you have to go after them. So Biden seemed to endorse Netanyahu saying that he wanted to repeat the carpet bombings of these Japanese cities inside Gaza, one of the most densely populated areas of the world where people are trapped. And certainly after Netanyahu told him this, Biden gave him all the weaponry he needed to do just exactly that. And that's why most of Gaza is now destroyed.
Right. And again, it's worth remembering that this is a total lie. The claim that you have to respond when people are in buildings. First of all, they never prove it, right? They never provide the evidence that Hamas is in these hospitals or refugee camps or wherever it is. But they, even by their own logic, you're not allowed to retaliate in the way that they retaliate, even if there were people in there. It has to be used as an active terror center, as in the moment that you go in there under international humanitarian law. Not that these people care about that, but they pretend they do. Yeah.
And again, I mean, just if you want to take for a second seriously the analogy to World War II, Japan wasn't occupying the United States. Israel is occupying Gaza and the West Bank. It's illegal. Nobody recognizes Israel's right to do that. The way to respond to October 7th would have been to end the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank and negotiate a prisoner exchange, because there are thousands of Palestinian hostages in Israeli prisons.
Right.
That is premised, though, on treating people as equal human beings. And we don't do that because we believe in Israeli supremacy. That's the bipartisan policy, and that's what Tom Cotton is espousing.
Okay.
Now, that said, the deal is underway. We predicted at the time that Hamas might break the terms of the deal, and that's apparently exactly what happened yesterday by not sending home Israeli civilian women. That's one reason why the Israeli government has paused the relocation.
Okay, so here's another talking point that people love using, which is that Hamas is breaking the ceasefire deal. Israel has already broken the ceasefire deal, and they were the first people to break it. And that is, they continue to murder innocent people returning to the north. They killed a child. The first ceasefire breaking was when they killed a child. And this claim that Hamas was supposed to release female civilian hostages first before the female soldiers. But if that's the case, then why did Israel say nothing yesterday? Why are they only objecting now after the soldiers are returned to Israel? But obviously, Tom Cotton's not going to ever doubt anything that Israel says, even though they consistently lie about this. And we've found time and time again that Hamas is not lying about the deal and does not break the ceasefire the way that Israel does. All right, let's go back some more.
relocation of Gazans to certain areas inside of Gaza. I would say if Hamas wants to continue this ceasefire, they need to respect every single term of that deal.
Like Israel, which has already broken it again.
Yeah. What can we expect from Tom Cotton? Just the premise that he's upset at a deal that even frees Israelis who he doesn't care about Palestinians, obviously.
Right, of course, right.
But he's so contemptuous of Palestinian life that he can't even welcome the freedom of Israelis because it means it takes away Israel's, capacity for at least for a couple of days to destroy Gaza more. I mean, which is what he ultimately cares about. And their aim again is like the problem Israel has is it's stolen Palestinian land, but you have still Palestinians still there in Gaza, the West Bank, and inside Israel. And that's the problem, the demographic problem that they've tried to address by making Gaza unlivable. And Tom Cotton is upset that plan has been interrupted, at least for now. But it certainly will proceed with Trump's blessing if Trump's words are to be believed. Because we're running out of time, I think we can skip ahead to John Brennan.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
He's your fave, yeah.
Yeah. So John Brennan, former director of the CIA, as mentioned before, under his watch, the CIA spied on the Senate when it was investigating the CIA for torture. He has thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard, who has been appointed by Trump to oversee the intelligence community. And John Brennan is not happy about it.
And it's the President's Daily Brief, but also the role that the Director of National Intelligence, Director of CIA play in order to ensure that the people who have to make those decisions in the National Security Council are fully informed about what the reality is, what the intelligence is, what our intelligence gaps are. And if they withhold things or if they skew things, it really is going to be detrimental to
Real quick before we let you go, Director, do those agency heads have, in that moment you're describing in that room, have that realization that, wait a minute, that's not what we told you? I mean, in other words, how does that coordination become undone when the person who's putting the final brief is skewed the information?
Well, I like to think that, Secretary of State Rubio, who is very familiar with the intelligence profession, is going to be speaking up because you have the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, others who are going to be there. So you want to make sure, again, that you have people who are informed, but also people who want to know the truth.
Right.
And not just people who want to give President Trump what he wants to hear. That is so dangerous. And none of the 6 presidents that I work for ever wanted the intelligence community to give them what they wanted. They wanted the intelligence community to give them what they needed, and then
You worked for George W. Bush.
Yeah, right.
John Brennan served in the CIA when it was doctoring intelligence to justify invading Iraq, to come up with the phony pretext that Iraq had WMDs and was working with Al-Qaeda. That was John Brennan. He was directly involved in that. He was a key deputy in that whole operation. So the fact that he can go on MSNBC and say all this and be treated seriously, it just speaks to how thin our memories are and just how completely devoid, devoid of any integrity our corporate media is. The fact that a former intelligence director like John Brennan can go out and say this. John Brennan's upset because Tulsi Gabbard has been skeptical of people like him before and challenged his pro-war narratives, including in Iraq, including in Syria. And he doesn't want to have someone in the job who will bring that critical thinking to the intelligence community. He doesn't want it. And that's what he's freaking out about.
Right.
But again, if you're most intelligence deceptions stand unchallenged. Like, for example, issues around Syria, if you challenge that now, you're in a very small minority, as I know very well myself. Right. But Iraq WMDs, come on, that's taking candy from a baby. I mean, this is the easiest thing in the book. Everyone knows that was a scam. No one defends that anymore. John Brennan was involved in it. It's a clear as day example of the intelligence community doctoring intelligence on behalf of a president. Brennan took part in it, and yet he can go on and pretend as if it's Tulsi Gabbard that poses the threat of doing that.
Yeah, and also, speaking of his honesty, it is worth noting that when the hacking that happened, the CIA hacking into Senate computers, when that happened, he said nothing could be further from the truth. We didn't do that. I mean, that's just beyond the scope of reason in terms of what we do. So that's one just totally overt lie. Another really overt lie is he said in relation to Obama's and the CIA's drone strikes, in the last year, there hasn't been a single collateral death because of the exceptional precision of the capabilities that we've been able to develop. And we know that's not true. I mean, famously, weddings were hit by drones. And if that's not a recipe for killing civilians, I don't know what is.
Yeah, he's a liar. He
a
also,
total liar.
He also, at the very end of the Mueller investigation, people remember that one, the whole thing when the president was framed as a Russian agent by people like John Brennan. John Brennan, then working as an analyst for MSNBC, told Lawrence O'Donnell that he was sure that Mueller was going to indict a bunch of Trump campaign associates and Trump family members for conspiring with Russia. And of course, he knew that there was no evidence to support that because he was in the intelligence community when Russiagate kicked off. But even as a MSNBC analyst, he was fine with lying, not just as CIA director to protect sources and methods. Even as an MSNBC analyst, he was okay with liars. So these people are known liars. That's why James Clapper, Tulsi Gabbard's predecessor, if she gets confirmed, he lied before Congress about mass surveillance. Now, in his memoir, he has a line where he says that in Iraq, it seems like we went searching for things that weren't actually there, which means we lied. We lied through our teeth. So these people are upset that Tulsi Gabbard might be, and I say that with a qualifier, might be someone who breaks the mold because of her own record so far of challenging intelligence deceptions and actually serving on the front lines of these wars that they helped cause, because she famously served in Iraq.
So crazy.
Okay. Lindsey Graham is facing a problem because, he's a loyal Trump soldier, right? He's down with Trump, but yet he's also a big proponent of all these foreign wars that people like Tulsi Gabbard have been critical of. So how is he going to vote on her nomination?
Gabbard, you met with her. She's going to have a hearing to be the director of national intelligence this coming week. Are you going to support her?
We'll see how she does. I've known her on the same reserve unit. Richard Burr, who's a good friend of mine, is going to introduce her, so that goes a long way. But
we'll see is not a ringing endorsement.
Huh?
We'll see is not a ringing
we'll
endorsement.
see is an honest answer. I tend to support everybody. I want to know about what happened in Syria and Edward Snowden, but I generally support everybody. If Richard has...
So what he's saying there is he wants to see if Tulsi Gabbard's going to toe the line on Syria and on Edward Snowden, because Tulsi Gabbard's famously called for pardoning Edward Snowden. And people like Lindsey Graham hate Edward Snowden because Snowden revealed the secrets and crimes that Lindsey Graham and his ilk support. So she wants to basically see Tulsi Gabbard toe the line and say, no, I don't support pardoning Edward Snowden. And yes, all of the anonymous evidence-free claims of chemical weapons used by the Syrian government, which justified our sanctions and strikes on Syria, all those allegations were true, and I retract my skepticism. That's what I think he's saying there, even though there's so much evidence to support Tulsi Gabbard's skepticism in Syria, including, by the way, her own predecessor, James Clapper. People forget this, but James Clapper went to Barack Obama when Obama was about to bomb Syria over a major chemical weapons attack in Ghouta in 2013 and said to Obama, the case against Assad is not a slam dunk. He was deliberately invoking the Iraq WMD scam to warn Obama against bombing Syria over the allegation against Assad because the evidence was not a slam dunk, which was the term used by John Brennan's colleagues at the CIA to George W. Bush in saying that Iraq had WMDs. So Tulsi Gabbard, by the way, in painting her as some radical and fringe player here, she's actually, her views are well within the established record, because even James Clapper had to go and warn Obama about his chemical weapons allegations. And the reason Clapper did that is because he lived through the Iraq war. He was embarrassed by it. And I think he had enough shame to not want to have a repeat episode.
Right. So crazy. So ridiculous.
Confidence Center, Burr, that would go along with me. But, I do want to make sure that we understand Assad's not a good guy. He's a bad guy. That Iran is trying to kill all the Jews, just like the Nazis did, and they would come after us. They've tried to kill our president. They're going to keep coming after us. They will destroy the state of Israel. And I want people in that sphere to be clear-eyed about the world in which we live in. The largest state sponsor of terrorism is Iran, and they're religious Nazis. 80 years after the Holocaust, there's a group of people trying to get a nuclear weapon to kill all the Jews. They cannot be allowed to do so.
I mean, of course, it's Dana Bash, so she's not going to push back on this at all. but it's just so ridiculous and absurd. I mean, Dana Bash is also a fan of distorting history, as people may remember. She famously compared what's happening on college campuses to 1930s Europe, so she probably likes his analogy.
And the reason why Lindsey Graham's bringing up Iran in this context, I think, is because Tulsi Gabbard was critical of Trump when Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal,
right?
Which was preventing Iran, by the way, from achieving a nuclear weapon. But from the point of view of Lindsey Graham, it was a problem because it was normalizing relations with, or it was a move towards normalized relations with Iran. It meant diplomacy, which Lindsey Graham hates. It also meant sanctions relief for Iran. And Lindsey Graham loves sanctions because he wants to basically immiserate the population of Iran until their government is overthrown, which is the playbook that just worked, or that just worked in Syria. So Lindsey Graham wants to make sure that Tulsi Gabbard is going to abandon her previous support for diplomacy rather than war. That's what he's basically saying there. Okay, well, we are coming to the end of the show. Yeah. Should we wrap it there? Do we want to do any more clips?
I think we should wrap it there, and we can bring some of this stuff, the stuff we didn't get to, we can do on Thursday Throwdown.
Okay, we'll tune into that. For the extra Monday morning bonus content, turn into the Thursday Throwdown.
Yeah, and that's you get that when you're a supporter of UsefulIdiotsPodcast.com.
Yeah, what a tease! What a tease! What a cliffhanger!
Yeah.
What corporate media clips didn't we show you today? Well, to find out on Thursday. On the Thursday Throwdown.
On Thursday Throwdown. Your midweek dose of media madness.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. What a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Thank you all so much. And we got a very generous chat. You guys get my Raid Shadow Legends money. I don't know what that means, but I like it. I'll take it.
Sounds like a video game.
Okay, yeah. And that's from Space Jew 2, which I assume is a reference to Lauren Boebert. I believe she talked about Space Jews. Was that it? Or was that the other one?
That was Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's the other one. Yeah.
That's what Space Jews. Space Jews is a great joke by Dave Chappelle about Israel, where he says he has a movie idea. It's about a group of people who come down from outer space and say, "Hey, we lived here a long time ago, so this land is ours." And he says it's called Space Jews.
Wow, he didn't get canceled for that.
Well,
I guess he's already canceled, right? He's pre-canceled.
Yeah. And if you missed it, he also talked about Palestine in his recent Saturday Night Live monologue and said some wonderful things. But yeah, and again, I'm butchering the joke, so look it up yourself. Dave Chappelle, Space Jews. Louis C.K. also has an amazing joke about Palestine, which I will not try to do. But again, two comedians have done just anyway. Those are my favorite Palestine jokes that I can think of. But actually, there's more. We should do a whole segment sometimes about great Palestine jokes.
Yeah, that would be great.
I just saw another one too from a comedian. Oh, what is his name? It's basically he was saying that he wanted to put a Palestinian flag on his home, but he didn't want to do that because he didn't want his home to be stolen by Israelis.
Right. Yeah, we should actually let's do an episode with the Palestinian comedian.
His name is Sandeep Bardwaj, the Sandeep on Instagram, the Sandeep. He's very, very funny. Very funny. So anyway, that's your bonus comedy content from Useful Idiots Monday morning. But you weren't expecting that. And look, since we're talking about Palestine, let's show this footage.
Yeah, this is what people should have in mind when Tim Cotton is defending what Israel's doing and comparing it to Hiroshima. Here's what it looks like right now in Gaza.
So for our audio audience, we're just showing a footage of a massive crowd of people making the march home to northern Gaza that they were ethnically cleansed from. Massive crowds walking along the Gaza coastline to their homes in the north. People carrying what's left of their possessions on their backs. And, look, many people are going home to homes that aren't there anymore because they were destroyed. And it's, but people are smiling. There's a young child we're seeing it here. I'm just describing this for audio audience, but it's very moving to see this, and it's a reminder that this is the Holocaust of our time. This is the Nazi ghetto of our time, and the fact that all these people survived and are now able to go home. How can you not be moved by that?
Yeah. It really is off. I mean, it's amazing to see the survivors, and it's absolutely devastating to see what they're coming home to, and it's also devastating to know how many people didn't survive and are still under the rubble literally as we speak.
Yeah. 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 And what is Trump saying? He's saying that we have to clean out Gaza and move people either permanently or on a temporary basis to places like Egypt and Jordan. And that comment has sparked outrage because it's ethnic cleansing. He even used the term "clean out," which is ethnic cleansing. And look, there will need to be some temporary housing for Palestinians, including maybe not in Gaza because the it's been so destroyed by Israel. But this idea that somehow you can move people out permanently, that's ethnic cleansing, and it's been normalized in a bipartisan way by a U.S. government that has supported Israel at every single turn. And that's why Antony Blinken, again, tried to do his own version of this when he lobbied Egypt and Jordan to take Palestinian refugees very early on in the genocide. And so Trump is crudely expressing what has been bipartisan. And this will be the attempt now by Israel to work with Trump to try to push out as many Palestinians as possible from Gaza.
Yeah.
And the West Bank also. And the West Bank to put, just because they want to take more land, to push Palestinians there into a smaller amount of territory in the hope that many people will go to Jordan. That's their agenda.
Yeah. So disgusting. Well, all right. This has been Monday Morning. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.